Cavin a wedding photographer and bridal boutique owner based in San Diego, and today's video is going to be all about public park weddings and what you should consider for them, as well as where to host the reception if you cannot host your reception at the public park. So there is a lot to consider when hosting a wedding at a public park, because public parks are usually not wedding venues, and you have to think about a lot of different things when you are trying to plan a wedding there. And a lot of times you might not be able to actually host your reception at the public park. You might only be able to have your ceremony there. So you have a lot going on when it comes to these venues. And my number one tip for something like this is to hire yourself a wedding planner or coordinator, because they're going to be very, very helpful in assisting you to plan something like this, especially if you have to have a secondary location. I highly recommend that you get yourself a planner, because trying to do something like this all by yourself can get very overwhelming, and it is highly likely that you are going to not think of some essential things that you might need for your own wedding that might come down to something that would be in place at normal venues that is not going to be in place at something like a public park, that I might not even cover in this video. So you might not be thinking of essential things that you might need, but a planner will think of something like this. So please go out, hire yourself a planner. I promise you it is money well spent. I've said this on so many of my videos, but that is my number one tip that I can give to you guys when you are working at any type of venue that is a non-traditional venue that does not come with all of the built-in pieces that you will need for a great successful wedding. So first things first, when you are hosting a wedding or any type of event at a public park, you are almost always going to need a permit, and you might need more than one permit. You might need a permit simply to rent the site. You might also need something like a permit to have sound or noise, live music, something like that. So you need to research the actual space that you're thinking of or spaces and see what kind of permit or permits are required for the area. You also need to look in to see how long you're allowed to be there, how many people you're allowed to have on site, because they might have some sort of cap on the guest, a noise ordinance, how late you're allowed to be there. There are always going to be rules and regulations with each site, and they might be different per site. Maybe they're the same at each site within the same county. So you are going to have to research rules like this and figure it out. Also, you're going to try to figure out if the space is going to be public or private once you rent it. When you're renting it, is it going to be available to other people, like random people? Are there going to be random people walking around in this space? I know there's a space called Sunset Cliffs in San Diego where you can rent it for a little wedding, but there's people walking around all around, so it's not private. And are you okay with that? Or do you absolutely need to have a space that becomes private once rented so other people can't have access to it? So you need to think about what's important to you and what the space allows for. Also, does the price of the permit cover your guest entry into the park, or are guests going to be expected to pay to get into the park? Definitely do not make your guests pay. You should have some sort of way that you are paying your guest entry into the park. I do not think that that is appropriate to make guests pay, even if it's like $2 to get into your wedding. I think that that is something that you should be covering well in advance, whether you mail a ticket to them or you set up some sort of system at the box office, whatever they're called at the park, and have it made so that each person on the wedding guest list has their ticket prepaid. So something like that would be very appropriate and appreciated by your guests, so they're not paying a ticket to get into your wedding. Another thing that you should be considering for public parks is how accessible it is. So if you have older guests coming, or if you have disabled guests coming, are they actually going to be able to easily get to your site? Are they going to have to hike over like lots of crazy branches or up a hill? Are they going to be able to easily get there and enjoy your wedding? Or are they not going to be able to make it because they can't physically get there? Or is it going to take everybody 30 minutes to hike into your site? Are they capable of doing that? Maybe if you've invited all 20 and 30 somethings who are physically capable of doing that, then it's not a problem. But if your guest list includes people who can't accessibly easily get there, then maybe skip the site that you're thinking of and save that for an adventure for just the two of you. Maybe you can go secretly elope there and take a photographer with you, but you need to be thinking of things like this. Also, are there easily attainable restrooms, or are they gross little dingy porta potties? You don't want to force your guests to use something that is not going to be clean or inviting for a restroom. Maybe you can rent some mobile restrooms. There are rentable mobile restroom companies that you can rent. So maybe you should do something like that if the restrooms provided on site are disgusting. So I know as a guest, I would not want to use a nasty bathroom on site, and I would much rather have a cleaner, nicer rented restroom if possible. Another thing to consider are what are the rules regarding music? How loud can your music be? Can you have music there? Also, can you bring in rentals? Do they allow you to bring in chairs? Some places might not let you bring in chairs. Are your guests going to be cool standing for 30 minutes for a ceremony? I don't know if I would want to do that. I can do that, but I don't know if I would want to do that. Some guests might not be able to do that. So you need to think about these things. Can you bring in tables? Can you bring in chairs? Can you bring in places for your live music to sit if they need to be sitting? You have to think about all of these things for the site. If your site can't allow this but you need it, you have to pass on that site. Also, how late can you stay? I know I've kind of already said that, but if you need to be able to stay for a certain amount of hours or until a certain time because you need to start at a certain time, you have to consider all of these different things when you are renting a space at a public park, because all these parks have a lot of rules and there's a lot that goes into it to make sure that you need to have the wedding that you want, but the park has to be able to operate under certain rules and regulations. One huge thing is think about a rain plan or inclement weather. Does the site allow you to bring in a tent if needed if it's going to rain? Or if it does rain, is the site going to get extremely muddy and therefore you're not going to be able to have your wedding there? What does the park do if it's having some sort of natural disaster or if it's raining? Does it shut down if it rains altogether and you're not going to be allowed to have your wedding there? You need to discuss this with the park. What happens if any sort of weather happens and you can't have your wedding there at all? Or do they allow you to bring in extra preventative rain measures? You need to know these things in advance, because if it does happen to rain or whatever happens, if you can't have your wedding there, then that is no good. Any venue that you're choosing needs to have a rain plan set in place so that all is good and you can still proceed with your wedding there should inclement weather happen. So now that we've kind of covered a lot of the things that you should be considering, now I know I haven't covered everything, but that's just all the things that you need to be considering before you even book this space. There's a lot more to it, and that's why I say hire yourself a planner, because they're going to be able to help you with actually starting the planning once you have chosen your public park space for your ceremony and or reception. Now, when you are choosing your reception space, if you're not choosing it at the same public park, because again, not all public parks would allow you to have your reception there, because some don't allow alcohol, and maybe you want to have alcohol at your reception because you don't want to have a dry reception, or maybe they don't allow you to go past a certain amount of time, or maybe you can't have it for more than like 2 hours, and obviously you can't fit a ceremony and reception into 2 hours, so you need a second location. And a lot of people have asked me to make a video on this, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long, about where to host your reception after your public park ceremony. And a lot of times what I would recommend are 2 different things. One, a traditional wedding venue, so like a hotel or something that is always just a wedding venue, or 2, a restaurant, so you can do one of the 2 options. And so if you're choosing a classic wedding venue, so something that just does weddings all the time, or as a hotel does weddings all the time, that's just a very easy option. And normally a venue like that, they'll do just a wedding for a full day, so they'll have a ceremony and reception on site there, and they might charge you a site rental fee for the ceremony. And so maybe you'll save on something like that because you're not doing a site rental for the ceremony because you had your ceremony somewhere else. So now you're not having to pay that, you're just paying for the reception portion of the day. So you're not having to rent it for as many hours. So maybe you might also save on an hourly cost. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. It just depends on the venue. Or you can choose a restaurant. So a lot of people will just go to a restaurant afterwards. You need to make sure that the restaurant can hold the amount of guests that you are planning on having. And I would also make sure that the restaurant has done weddings before, or at least has done a large group of people, because that is a big deal to bring in that many people and to be able to serve them all in a timely order. Also, one thing I would consider if you are doing a restaurant, are you planning on having a first dance, parent dances, little events like that, and is there a space for it? Because you don't want to just be dancing crammed in a little corner of the restaurant. So plan for something like that. Make sure that they have appropriate spaces if you are planning on doing events like dancing. If they don't, then maybe you want to go somewhere else for dancing after, if you have your heart set on that restaurant. So there are still things to consider. I know it gets so complicated, but if you can choose a restaurant that does have some sort of a little dance space where you can dance, then that is great. Or maybe you don't care about those things at all, and that's why you're going to choose a restaurant that's a little bit more of a casual atmosphere, then that's great, and you've just simplified everything and it's all nice and easy. But that can be a pro to choosing an actual wedding venue, because usually wedding venues already have something like that set up in mind, or they just have a clean ballroom space where they can set up the tables in a way that makes a dance area. So that might be a different reason to choose a wedding venue, because you already have those built-in event spaces set up. So anyways, whatever you guys choose, I'm sure will be great. You can pair your public park with a reception space like a wedding venue or a restaurant, or maybe you can have your public park have your ceremony and reception. But if you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I definitely want to hear more from you guys in the comments. I feel like I want to engage and talk to you guys more. Tell me who you are, where you're getting married, when your wedding is, and which one of my videos are your favorites. So anyways, I will see you guys next week. Bye!